Lester, it's great to see you. You and I have been dealing with some of these issues in theology and evolution for, I hate to say how long, but maybe more than half a century. We've had different paths after our young friendship together. From your perspective as a biblical scholar, how do you look at the question of evolution and theology?
It's always been an interest to me. I started out as growing up in the American Bible Belt, being very anti-evolution. But I was also interested in science, and in fact almost became a scientist. I didn't in the end, but I was certainly interested in paleontology. But as a believer, as I saw myself, I rejected evolution. However, I went on to study a PhD in religion, and my perspective on the Bible changed. And I didn't change anything in my understanding of science, but I began to see things from a different perspective. The result finally was to feel that there is no conflict between religion and evolution, an understanding of evolution, understanding of human origins as being part of evolution. And it's because, as I say, because my understanding of the Bible changed.
How so? What about the Bible did you believe, and then how has your scholarship over the years affected that belief?
Originally, I took the fairly normal fundamentalist view that the Bible is inerrant in the autographs. That is, there are no errors in it, and so on. Well, as I began to study the Bible and study in the original languages, and study its environment, the ancient Near East, the Greco-Roman world, and also the history of the text. I found the Bible has come down to us over a long period, and it has copyist mistakes. So how could it be inerrant in the autograph? Well, the autographs is the idea of the original text. But if there are later copyist errors, then what good is it to say it's inerrant in the autographs? And then I began to understand more about the background of the Bible. And for instance, I found that there are flood stories all over the ancient Near East. And some of them actually are very close to those in the Bible, yet slightly different. And I came to see, as many scholars do, that probably the flood story in the Bible was borrowed from Mesopotamia. That is, it wasn't originally an Israelite story, but was borrowed and adapted and put in a monotheistic context and so on. But nevertheless, is something that originated elsewhere. The same with the creation story. Now, if you look at Genesis 1, a very beautiful, almost poetic text. But when you start to read through it and you look at our understanding of modern science, where's the Big Bang? Now, I know that's a theory that might fall in a century or so or whatever, but at the moment it looks very clear like that's the origin of the universe. But there's nothing in Genesis 1 that would suggest the Big Bang. It starts out, Breshit bara Elohim, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. Yehi or vayehi or. And then he said, the light is called day and the darkness is called night. Now, the sun and the moon are created later, and yet here is light and darkness. And how do we fit this in with millions of billions of galaxies and so on? It doesn't say, let there be galaxies. You'd think, let there be light. It's from very much from a perspective of the earth and of someone living on the earth. And it becomes clear that the writer is bringing in his perspective from his own times as he understands the universe. And so, as I say, it's a very beautiful account, very poetic and so on. But it's not a scientific account. And why should we try to drag science into it? So I began to see things like that. And of course, as scholars will tell you, it's generally accepted that you have two creation accounts. You have Genesis 1, and then in Genesis 2, you have Adam and Eve. And the two don't quite mesh. You can sort of fit them together, but there are differences between them. However, if we look elsewhere in the biblical text, if you look at somewhere like Isaiah 27, you have God fighting monsters of chaos called Leviathan and so on. And you have the Tananim, which sometimes is translated creatures or whales or so on, but it was a mythical creature. And God creates by defeating these monsters of chaos. Now that's another creation account. In fact, that's probably the original Israelite one, because this is fairly common in the ancient Near East, in that part of the ancient Near East, the West Semitic area. But the writer of Genesis 1, who was probably writing in the Babylonian exile, knew of a Babylonian myth called the Enuma Elish, which has, and there are some elements of Genesis 1 that the vocabulary that look like it might have been taken from the Enuma Elish. For instance, the word Spirit of God moved over the great deep, the Tahom in Hebrew. Well, it happens that there is a monster of chaos in Babylon called Tiamat. A woman, a female figure, she's a monster, so woman maybe is not correct, but a female. But it's clear that this is a cognate term, Tiamat, Tiam, Tahom, and they fit together. So it looks like the writer is taking perhaps the Babylonian myth and then is demythologizing it.
Fundamentalists would say that there may be these other stories, flood, various, but they're all rooted in the story that was in the Bible that was more primitive than the others, and the others were distortions either of the direct Bible, that depends on when it was written because they think it was written earlier, or that the Bible story was sort of a direct oral account of what was really there, and all the others are derivative.
You have to go a long way around to get to that. That's a fairly tendentious sort of reasoning because, for instance, the flood story, we find it already as early as the 3rd millennium. We actually have text that can be dated to around 2000 or earlier BC. There is not anyone I know of who can date the Bible anything like that early.
Right.
And as I could say in another context, when we start looking at the biblical text, we can tell some idea of when it's to date it because of the Hebrew language. The language changed. So it's not that early. If you want to say, well, it was preserved orally, that's a hypothesis. How do you prove it? How do you demonstrate it? You know.
What about the first word, Bereshit? I mean, that modern that means beginning.
Yes.
So Bereshit, in the beginning, you could even translate buzz with a beginning. Could that indicate a sense that there was a beginning?
I suppose. Beginning is, it's like in the end. You know, when is a beginning? When is an end? It's it's like the English word beginning. It has many meanings, and we could say, okay, it's a sort of an overall context in the beginning, and then everything else follows from that. But of course, some translations, and it's possible to translate it that way, is when God began to create. And some will argue that's the more likely meaning. I don't see any way to resolve that. It's we don't have anything to compare it with. It's like many things in the biblical text.
So when you come to this conclusion, having had your early life experience as a very sincere believer, and then coming to confront the Bible in all these errancies, and certainly not believing in inerrancy anymore. Why then do you seek to harmonize evolution and theology rather than just saying I was wrong about the theology and only the evolution is right, rather than trying to harmonize them?
Because I still think religion has a place, and philosophy has a place, and we even if we start out with evolution, we start out with something, and we have to go back. Where do we begin? And this is really where the question comes down. Where did the universe come from? Where did the laws come from that lead to life, makes life evolve? And then I have to ask, well, we come back to religious questions or philosophical questions, you could argue from a philosophical point of view. So I still am stuck with the question of where did it all start, even accepting evolution, yeah.